There's a very specific, almost sharp kind of heartbreak that can only happen in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about, burning a piece of toast. I'm talking high stakes, high effort baking.
The kind where you've invested maybe 4 hours, a lot of emotional energy, and what, $20 worth of pistachios?
Exactly that.
Yeah.
You're making baklava or maybe a revani.
Mm-hmm.
You've clarified the butter. You've layered all that phyllo dough until your back is aching.
Oh, yeah.
You put this thing in the oven and the whole house smells incredible. It comes out looking perfect, golden, puffed up. You pour the syrup, you hear that little sizzle.
Is this sizzle?
And you think, I've done it. I'm a master baker.
And then comes the moment of truth?
The autopsy.
Yeah.
You let it cool, you cut in, and it's just a disaster. The top is sticky, sure.
Yeah.
But the middle?
Bone dry.
Bone dry. Like sweet cardboard. Or maybe it's even worse. The whole thing's just collapsed into this soggy, wet mush. It's just devastating.
It is heartbreaking. And what's so fascinating about the research we're looking at today is that it classifies this failure. Well, not as bad luck.
Okay.
And not even really as a bad recipe. It calls it a failure of physics.
Physics.
Ah.
So we're blaming Isaac Newton because my baklava is dry.
In a way, yeah. The sources we've pulled for this deep dive, and they range from modern culinary science papers all the way back to Ottoman palace cooking archives, they all call making these desserts the most unforgiving exam in the kitchen.
The unforgiving exam. That sounds ominous.
It's accurate, though, because you can have the best recipe in the world handed down for generations. You can follow it to the gram.
Right.
But if you don't understand the invisible stuff, the dynamics of heat, of structure, of time, you will fail. It's not about ingredients. It's engineering.
Okay, I love this. So our mission today is to stop just, blindly following a recipe card and start understanding the kitchen physics behind it all.
Exactly.
We're going to unpack why these desserts fail and, more importantly, how to get that perfect, sticky, sweet magic all the way to the center.
We are moving beyond pour sugar water on it and hope. We're going to look at thermodynamics, fluid dynamics, and some of these secrets of the old masters to fix that dry center tragedy for good.
So let's start at the very beginning, at the crime scene. When we say a dessert needs to drink the syrup, what's actually happening? Because just dumping liquid on a solid, well, gravity isn't doing all the work here.
No, gravity is probably the least interesting force involved. If you just rely on gravity, the syrup pools on top. The real core concept in the sources is capillary action.
Capillary action. Okay, that's taking me way back to high school biology. Isn't that how plants get water from their roots all the way up to the leaves?
Exactly. It's the ability of a liquid to flow in these really narrow spaces, sometimes even against gravity.
Wow.
So for your dessert to really absorb that syrup, it can't just be a solid block of cooked batter. It has to be designed as a controlled sponge.
A controlled sponge. I like that. So we're not baking a cake, we're manufacturing a sponge.
Think about it like a kitchen sponge. It works because it has thousands of these tiny, interconnected open cells. If you tried to wipe up a spill with a brick, nothing would happen, right? The liquid just stays there. The problem is that most of us are inadvertently baking bricks.
So the batter itself, or how we layer the phyllo, that's what determines if the syrup can even get in the door.
Precisely. You're an architect. You're building an infrastructure. You need microscopic voids or pores baked right into the structure. If those pores are blocked or they haven't formed at all,
The syrup just stops.
it hits the surface and stops dead. And that's what creates what the notes call the lake effect.
The lake effect.
Yeah, the syrup just pools on the surface. It looks super wet. It looks glistening and delicious, but it's a lie.
It's just sitting in the lobby.
Exactly. The doors to the rooms are all locked.
Okay, that is a betrayal. So step one is building the hallways for the syrup. But let's say we do that. We have a good porous cake. Where does it go wrong next? What's the biggest mistake people make?
The sources are unanimous on this one. They call it Hara 1, mistake number 1. And it's so tragic because it feels like the right thing to do.
What is it?
It's the error of pouring hot syrup over hot dessert.
Oh, I have absolutely done this. My logic is always keep everything hot, keep the energy going.
It seems logical.
Yeah, like if I let it cool down, something bad will happen. Why is that wrong?
It's a chemical disaster. You just have to remember what starch does when it meets heat and moisture.
It swells up.
It essentially explodes. It gelatinizes. So when you take a boiling hot liquid and you dump it onto a boiling hot starch surface, like a cake right out of the oven, you trigger an instant aggressive gelatinization. The surface starches swell up so fast that they merge.
So you're basically sealing the surface shut.
You're cauterizing it. You create this gummy, impenetrable skin right on top. You've welded the door shut.
Wow. So the syrup is trying to get in, but the heat reaction just slammed the door in its face.
Correct. The syrup sits on top, makes the crust soggy and gross, while the bottom is completely untouched. You get a soggy roof and a dry basement.
That explains that phenomenon perfectly. I always thought I just wasn't using enough syrup.
Nope. It was the temperature.
So what's the fix? What's the golden rule here?
The rule has survived for centuries, and it's simple. You need contrast. There are two valid scenarios. Scenario A, a hot dessert meets cold syrup.
Okay.
Or scenario B, a cold dessert meets hot syrup.
But never hot on hot.
And never cold on cold. You need that temperature gradient. Without the gradient, you get no movement.
Okay, walk me through the physics.
Yeah.
Why does the contrast make it move? Let's take scenario A, hot dessert, cold syrup. This is for things like revani, right? Spongy cakes.
Correct. So picture your cake. It's just come out of the oven. What's happening with the air and steam inside all those little pores?
Well, it's hot, and hot gas expands.
Right. The structure's expanded, the pores are wide open, the cake is physically gasping. Now, you introduce cool syrup. As that cooler liquid hits the hot cake, it rapidly cools the gas inside those pores.
And when gas cools, it contracts. It shrinks.
It shrinks. And that rapid contraction creates a vacuum effect. The cooling air inside shrinks, and that negative pressure literally sucks the syrup down into the core of the cake.
Whoa! So it's not just gravity. The cake is actively inhaling the syrup because of that temperature shock.
It's a tiny vacuum pump. That's why hot on cold is so effective for those spongy cakes. You're using gas laws to your advantage.
That is incredible. Okay, so now flip it. Scenario B, cold dessert, hot syrup. The note said this is often for denser things, like baklava that was made yesterday.
Yes. In that case, the dessert is static. It's room temperature. The pores are set. They're rigid. It's not gasping anymore, so the energy has to come from the liquid.
The syrup brings the party.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hot syrup is high energy, but more importantly, heat lowers viscosity. Hot syrup is much, much thinner and more fluid than cold syrup.
So it's thinner, can get into smaller spaces.
It has the kinetic energy to wiggle its way into those static pores.
But if they're both the same temperature?
Stagnation. No temperature difference means no energy transfer, no vacuum, no kinetic drive. The syrup just sits there, confused.
Confused syrup. It's just loitering on the roof. That's a huge takeaway. It's a law of physics. Okay, so we've got temperature contrast.
Yeah.
But what about the syrup itself? I feel like I've made syrup that was just sweet water, and other times I've accidentally made, like, hard candy.
And that is hara too, mistake number 2. The consistency problem. It's all about finding the Goldilocks zone for viscosity.
Because if it's too thick, it can't physically fit through the pores.
Right. You boil it too long, too much water evaporates, and you're basically making molten glass. It's too dense to travel through the cake's network. It's like trying to push a bowling ball through a garden hose.
It just sits on top and gets all crusty.
Yeah, it'll eventually crystallize into this crunchy white mess.
So just make it watery then. Just dissolve sugar in water and pour it on.
That is almost worse. Sure, it goes in easily. It floods the building. But it doesn't stay. And water is a solvent. So if the syrup is too thin, it actually attacks the starch network of the cake. It dissolves the structure you worked so hard to build.
It turns the sponge into mush.
Total mush. Porridge. You need a syrup that's thin enough to get in, but thick enough to, provide some structural support once it's there.
So what's the magic formula?
The classic formula from the sources is a 1-to-1 ratio by volume. 1 cup water, 1 cup sugar. But the variable everyone messes up is the boil time.
How long?
The sources are pretty specific, 10 to 12 minutes.
That seems really long. I feel like I usually just do it until the sugar disappears.
That's just hot sugar water. You need 10 to 12 minutes to evaporate some water to concentrate the solution. You're also inverting some of the sugar, which helps stop it from crystallizing later on.
Okay, but how do I know it's ready without, like, a lab viscometer?
No lab equipment needed. The old masters used a visual check called the thread test.
Okay, walk me through it.
You dip a spoon in the boiling syrup, lift it up, and watch the last few drops fall back in. If it just dribbles like water, it's not ready. If it comes off in a big glob, you've gone too far.
What's the sweet spot?
You're looking for a thin thread. The stream should narrow into this continuous, slightly viscous thread that holds together for just a second before it breaks. It should look like light oil.
Light oil. That's a great visual.
And the sources do note this can vary a little. Something like baklava, which has a really tight compressed layers, it's a dense sponge. It needs a slightly thinner syrup to get in there.
Versus a sponge cake like revani.
Right. Revani has big open pockets. It can handle and actually needs a slightly thicker syrup so it doesn't just get waterlogged. Yeah. You match the liquid to the sponge.
It's engineering again.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so we have the sponge, the temperature, the viscosity. Is there anything else that can ruin everything? The notes mentioned an invisible enemy.
Yes. Hada 3. The insidious mistake. This is undercooking.
But wait, if the top is gorgeous and brown and crispy, I'm taking it out. I'm terrified of burning it.
And that's why it's insidious. The dessert is lying to you. That browning on top can happen way before the center is actually cooked through.
So it looks done.
But inside, it's still wet dough. And
Okay.
that is fatal for a syrup dessert. If the inside is doughy, the sponge structure hasn't set, the pores haven't opened,
There are no hallways.
there's no room at the end, you can pour the most perfect syrup at the most perfect temperature, but it will hit that raw center and just stop. It cannot penetrate raw batter.
So how do we know for sure?
For baklava, one source suggests you have to look at the bottom. Lift a piece up. The bottom layers need to be slightly crispy. If the bottom is pale, the center is raw.
Check the undercarriage. Got it. What about for a cake?
The knife test, but with a little nuance. A knife should come out clean, of course, but the sources say the texture inside needs to be thirsty.
Thirsty.
It means it's fully baked to the point of being a little bit dry. You want the cake to be slightly dry before the syrup goes in. If it's holding too much of its own moisture, it's already full. It won't absorb the new liquid.
That's so counterintuitive. You have to dry it out just to make it wet.
Reciprocity. You create a moisture deficit, so the syrup has a reason to go in.
You know, hearing all these rules, it really puts the history of these desserts into context. This wasn't just someone throwing things in a bowl.
Not at all. We're talking about traditions from the Ottoman Empire, the Middle East, and you have to remember, sugar was not cheap.
Right, it was white gold.
Exactly. So making a dessert like this was a flex. It was a status symbol. And because the ingredients were so precious, making these became a palace test for chefs.
High-stakes baking.
Imagine the pressure. If you ruined the sugar, you weren't just a bad cook, you were wasting the Sultan's wealth.
So they had to get the science right.
They developed it under extreme pressure. The old masters didn't have thermometers. They had intuition and patience. There's a great maxim from one of the historical sources. The dessert does not take the syrup by force. It waits for the right moment.
The dessert does not take the syrup by force. That sounds like a philosophy for life.
It really is. But it speaks to this idea of patience. For instance, one of the secrets in the text is the first steam.
The first steam. What's that?
When you pull the dessert from the oven, your first instinct is to pour the syrup on immediately. To rush.
Yeah, you want to get that sizzle.
But the masters say, wait. Wait for the initial violent burst of steam to escape.
For how long?
Just a minute or two. Let the dessert breathe. If you pour while that intense steam is pushing out, you're fighting against it. You're trying to force liquid in while gas is forcing its way out.
It's a collision.
It's a collision.
Yeah.
Let that first steam escape. The pressure equalizes a bit, then you pour. It's a polite conversation, not an invasion.
I love that. And there was another warning in there about suffocation, which I'm definitely guilty of.
Yes. Never, ever cover the dessert right after you pour the syrup.
But I do that to trap the moisture. Put some foil on top, keep it warm.
And you're ruining it. The dessert has to breathe. Steam needs to keep escaping as the syrup goes in. If you cover it, you trap that steam. It condenses on the foil and just rains back down on your crust.
Goodbye, crispiness.
Hello, soggy mush. You suffocate the crunch, you have to leave it open to the air.
No lids. Let it breathe.
Yeah.
And then we wait.
We wait. The source calls the first 30 minutes the Great Deception.
A deception. Why?
Because in that first half hour, it might look like all the syrup is gone. You think, oh no, it's still dry, I need more.
Right.
Or it might look like it's swimming in a lake and you think, I've drowned it.
It's playing mind games with you.
It is, and
Yeah.
it's so tempting to intervene, but you can't. The dessert needs hours to slowly pull that liquid into its deepest parts. It's a slow migration.
It's incredible how much of this is psychology. It's about fighting your own anxiety. You just have to set the right conditions and then step back.
That is the whole philosophy. It's a relationship of reciprocity between the solid and the liquid. You can't force them to marry. You can only arrange the wedding.
Reciprocity. That really is the word of the day. It sums everything up.
It really does. It's a partnership.
So let's wrap this up. We started with the tragedy of the dry center and realized it's not just bad luck.
No, it's a violation of physics.
We learned you have to build a controlled sponge first. You can't pour syrup on a brick.
And we learned the cardinal rule. Contrast. Hot dessert, cold syrup. Or cold dessert, hot syrup. That temperature difference is your engine.
We talked about viscosity, that thin thread test, not water, not honey, light oil. And the invisible enemy of undercooking. Doughy inside means nowhere for the syrup to go.
And finally, patience. Wait for the first steam. Don't suffocate it. Just trust the process.
The source material had this really poetic warning at the end. It said the dessert takes silent revenge.
Yes, that was a beautiful line. If you get the heat, consistency, and time right, the dessert rewards you. If you get it wrong, it takes silent revenge.
Silent revenge. That's terrifying.
It is, because it doesn't explode. It just waits until you serve it to your guests, and then it reveals its dry, disappointing heart.
Ouch. That is the coldest revenge.
Elegant and brutal.
You know, it makes you think. We spend so much of our lives trying to force results, trying to force a project to work or a conversation to go a certain way. We're just pouring hot syrup on hot dough, hoping it works.
When you can't force absorption.
Exactly. You have to create the right conditions first, build the structure, create the contrast, and then wait. The syrup has to be invited in.
That's a powerful thought. Instead of just pushing harder, maybe we need to check the temperature and the timing.
Something to chew on.
Oh.
Hopefully while eating a perfectly soaked piece of baklava. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Go check your oven temps, and we'll catch you next time.